of gold and crimson. The streets were calm, quiet, the kind of silence that masks tension just waiting to erupt. On one of those streets, driving home in his modest black sedan, was a man named Charles Williams. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't swerving. He wasn't doing anything wrong. But in Ridgewood, a black man behind the wheel of a nice car didn't need to do anything wrong to become a target. That's when Officer Bradley, one of Ridgewood's most notorious cops, spotted him. Bradley had a reputation: quick to pull over black drivers, quick to assume the worst, and quicker still to throw his weight around. To him, every black man was a suspect until proven otherwise. Blue lights flashed. Sirens wailed. Charles calmly pulled to the side of the road. The officer strutted to the car, arrogance dripping from every step. He tapped on the window with the edge of his flashlight, not politely but with that sharp, threatening rhythm meant to unnerve. "License and registration," Bradley barked before Charles could even lower his window fully. Charles handed it over without protest. His hands steady, his voice calm. He'd dealt with men like Bradley before. But what Bradley didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Charles Williams wasn't just another black man from Ridgewood. Charles was the newly elected mayor. But Charles stayed quiet. He wanted to see how far this officer would go. Bradley looked at the license, scoffed, and rolled his eyes. "Charles Williams? Fancy car. Where'd you steal it?" His words dripped with contempt, his smirk daring Charles to react. Charles took a slow breath. "Officer, I suggest you run the registration. Everything will be clear." But Bradley wasn't interested in clarity. He was interested in power. He ordered Charles out of the car, shouting loud enough for neighbors to peek out their windows. He shoved him against the hood, patted him down aggressively, muttering under his breath about "people like you." And Charles endured it all in silence. Because he knew something Bradley didn't. The radio crackled on Bradley's shoulder. "Unit 7, status check? Got a suspect detained?" Bradley sneered into the mic. "Looks like Grand Theft Auto. Maybe something bigger." The dispatcher paused. "Suspect's name?" Bradley flipped the license arrogantly between his fingers. "Charles Williams." Silence. Then, almost trembling, "Unit 7, confirm. Charles Williams, the mayor?" Bradley froze. His eyes darted from the license to the man standing calmly before him. The same man he had just shoved, humiliated, accused. The mayor?" Bradley stammered. Charles finally let a small smile curve his lips. "Yes, officer. The mayor. Your mayor." Neighbors whispered from their porches. Cell phones recorded. Suddenly the power shifted. The same man Bradley had tried to degrade now stood taller, stronger, not because of the badge but because of the truth. Bradley's arrogance crumbled. His face drained of color as he realized every second of his misconduct had been witnessed, documented, undeniable. Charles adjusted his jacket, his voice steady but commanding. "You see, officer, the difference between us is that your power ends with that badge. Mine comes from the people. And the people are watching right now." The tension broke like a dam bursting. Bradley's hands trembled. His smirk was gone. The neighbors who once feared speaking out now raised their voices. "We saw what you did. Treating the mayor like a criminal? This is who's supposed to protect us?" Bradley stumbled, stuttering apologies. But Charles didn't let him off so easily. "Respect," Charles said, his voice booming, "shouldn't depend on a title. It shouldn't depend on whether you know who I am. It should depend on basic human dignity. Something you clearly forgot tonight." And in that moment, the cop who had so often terrorized others was stripped of his authority, not by force, not by violence, but by truth and exposure. Justice, at least for this night, had finally turned the tables. But as Charles walked back to his car, a hush fell over the crowd. Because just before he closed the door, Bradley's radio crackled again. "Unit 7, we've got a situation downtown. The mayor is needed immediately. Tell him it's urgent." Charles's expression shifted. The calm confidence remained, but in his eyes was something new, worry. Because while one battle had been won tonight, a larger war was brewing. He turned to the crowd, his voice lower, heavy with foreshadowing. "Tonight was just the beginning. There are bigger powers at play in this town. And they won't stop at a traffic stop. They'll come for me and they'll come for all of us." The neighbors leaned in, silence thick as smoke. Charles closed his car door, engine humming to life. "But remember this," he said, voice steady through the open window, "the fight for justice doesn't end when you win one battle. It begins when you realize how many more battles lie ahead." And with that he drove off into the night, blue and red lights fading in his rearview. But what Charles didn't see, what none of them saw, was another police cruiser parked at the corner, engine off, lights dark. Inside sat a man in a higher rank, watching, listening, and making a quiet call into his phone. "Yeah," the voice muttered. "We've got a problem. The mayor's becoming a threat. It's time we handle it, permanently." And just like that, the story was no longer about one corrupt cop. It was about a system. The night after the traffic stop spread through Ridgewood like wildfire. Videos of the incident circulated on social media, neighbors replaying the moment Officer Bradley realized he had humiliated the very man he was supposed to serve. The town was buzzing, some with pride that justice had been seen, others with resentment that a black man in power had dared to stand tall. But for Charles Williams, the mayor, the night was far from over. When his phone rang at 11:47 p.m., he knew it wasn't good news. It was the police chief himself, Chief Reynolds, a man with a polished smile but a reputation darker than any uniform. "Mr. Mayor," Reynolds said smoothly, almost too smoothly, "there's a situation downtown. Vandalism at City Hall. We'll need you here immediately." Charles hesitated. He'd already felt something off when Bradley's radio mentioned urgent business downtown. Now hearing it from Reynolds, the unease grew deeper. Still, he couldn't ignore it. He was the mayor. It was his duty. By midnight, Charles pulled up to City Hall. The streets were eerily empty, not a single reporter, not even a curious bystander. Strange for an act of vandalism. But the moment he stepped out of his car, he knew why. 2 police cruisers boxed him in. Officers emerged, not with clipboards or cameras to assess damage, but with hands already hovering near their holsters. And at the center of it all, Chief Reynolds waited, his arms folded, a cold smile playing on his lips. Reynolds laughed, cruel and mocking. "Doesn't matter. By sunrise, it'll be yours in the eyes of the public." But before Reynolds could order the arrest, another voice cut through the night. "Chief Reynolds." Everyone turned. From the shadows, a group of townspeople emerged, cell phones raised, recording. They had followed Charles, suspicious of the so-called vandalism. Among them was Mrs. Jenkins, a retired teacher with a voice loud enough to shake windows. "We saw you plant it," she shouted. "We got it all on camera." Reynolds froze, his plan unraveling before his eyes. The officers shifted uneasily, torn between loyalty to their chief and the undeniable truth that dozens of witnesses now stood against them. Charles took a step forward, his voice strong. "This is the difference between your power and mine, Chief. You operate in darkness. I stand in the light. And tonight the people saw everything." Reynolds' jaw clenched. His eyes burned with fury. But he couldn't act. Not now, not with the crowd recording, chanting, demanding justice. "Resign," voices shouted. "Corrupt. Lock him up." The tide had turned again. Reynolds, once untouchable, now stood exposed, cornered, humiliated. Charles turned to the crowd, raising his hand for silence. "Tonight proves one thing. Corruption only thrives when good people stay silent. But when we stand together, when we hold them accountable, no badge, no title, no system can silence the truth." The crowd roared in agreement. But as the chants echoed through the night, Charles noticed Reynolds whispering into his radio, his face calm again, too calm. Something wasn't right. Minutes later, the distant rumble of engines grew louder. Not one, not two, but a convoy of police SUVs rolled into the square. Dozens of officers poured out, shields, batons, and rifles at the ready. The crowd gasped. This wasn't just backup. This was an army. Reynolds smiled darkly, his confidence restored. "You see, Mayor, you may have the people. But I have the system. And the system doesn't lose." The townspeople huddled together, fear creeping into their faces. Charles stood firm, but even he knew, this was bigger than one cop, bigger than one chief. This was the machine of oppression revealing its true face. As the armored line advanced, shields glinting under the streetlights, Charles whispered under his breath, "So this is how far they're willing to go." He turned to the people, his voice steady despite the storm gathering before them. "Don't back down. Whatever happens tonight, let the world see the truth." And just as the police raised their batons, a sudden explosion of headlights flooded the square. Black SUVs, not police cruisers, screeched to a halt. Men in suits stepped out, their badges not local but federal. One of them shouted, "This operation is over. Everyone stand down." The crowd erupted in shock. Reynolds' face twisted in rage. Charles's heart raced. Who were these men? Allies? Enemies? And most of all, what did they want with him? The night air in Ridgewood carried a heaviness that no wind could sweep away. What had begun as one man's fight against a racist cop had now exploded into something far larger, a battle against the very system sworn to protect the people. Charles Williams, the mayor, stood face to face with Chief Reynolds and his army of officers, their shields reflecting the cold streetlights. But then came the interruption, the sudden arrival of black SUVs, federal agents spilling out, their presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. The lead agent stepped forward, tall, imposing, his badge glinting under the glow of headlights. His voice boomed with authority. "This operation is over. Chief Reynolds, your men will stand down immediately." The crowd gasped, whispers rippling like waves. Cameras zoomed in. For a moment hope flickered. But Charles wasn't celebrating. He'd been in politics long enough to know one thing. When outsiders swoop in this quickly, it's never just to help. Reynolds snarled, defiant. "You think you can walk into my town, into my department, and call the shots?" The agent's jaw tightened. "It's not your town anymore, Chief. You've crossed too many lines. And now it's out of your hands." Reynolds hesitated, then slowly raised his hand. His officers lowered their batons, their riot line breaking. For the first time all night, Charles saw fear in their eyes. The people cheered. "Justice," they shouted. "Accountability." But Charles noticed something the crowd didn't. Reynolds' smirk hadn't disappeared. If anything, it grew sharper, colder. Like a man who knew the game wasn't lost, only shifting to a bigger board. The agent turned to Charles. "Mayor Williams, we need to speak. Privately." Charles hesitated. He didn't trust Reynolds, but he trusted strangers even less. Still, with the entire town watching, he had no choice. Inside City Hall, under the fluorescent lights, Charles faced the agents. The leader introduced himself as Special Agent Monroe from the Department of Justice. His words came fast, clipped, rehearsed. "Mayor Williams, you've exposed misconduct at the local level. But what you don't realize is this: Ridgewood isn't isolated. Corruption here is just a piece of something much larger. Chief Reynolds is connected. There are men above him. And they don't intend to let you dismantle what they've built." Charles narrowed his eyes. "What exactly are you saying, Agent?" Monroe leaned forward, his tone grave. "I'm saying last night's traffic stop wasn't random. You were targeted. They wanted to send a message. But when you didn't bow down, they escalated. They will keep escalating. And if you keep pushing, you won't just lose your office. You'll lose your life." The room went silent. The fluorescent lights hummed like insects. Finally Charles spoke. "So what do you want from me?" Silence. Monroe shook his head. "Cooperation. We need your help. With your platform, your access, we can expose this network from the inside. But it won't be easy. And it won't be safe." Charles felt the weight of his choice pressing down on him. He could walk away, resign, protect himself. Or he could step deeper into the fire, risking everything not just for himself, but for every black man and woman in Ridgewood who had ever been silenced, humiliated, or broken by the system. And in that moment he knew. There was no turning back. "I'll help," Charles said, his voice steady. "But on one condition. This isn't just about bringing down Reynolds. It's about changing Ridgewood forever. No half measures." Monroe nodded slowly. "Then you should prepare yourself. Because the people you're up against, they play for keeps." The next evening the showdown came. Word had spread like wildfire that Mayor Williams would be addressing the people on the courthouse steps. Thousands gathered, supporters, skeptics, reporters from out of town. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Charles stepped up to the podium, his heart steady despite the storm brewing around him. He looked over the sea of faces, young and old, black and white, hopeful and afraid. And then he spoke. "Last night I was stopped not because I broke the law but because of the color of my skin. And when that failed, they tried to break me with lies, with planted evidence. But the truth stood stronger. And now they want you to believe that corruption is just one bad cop. But I'm here to tell you, it goes higher. Much higher." The crowd erupted, cheers mixing with gasps. From the side, Charles saw Reynolds lurking in the shadows, his arms folded, a wolf waiting for the right moment to strike. Charles raised his voice, his words slicing through the night. "This is bigger than Ridgewood. This is about every man and woman who has ever been silenced. And I promise you this, no matter how deep this corruption runs, we will tear it out by its roots." The people roared. The courthouse steps shook with chants, "Justice! Justice! Justice!" But then, out of nowhere, a single gunshot cracked the night. The crowd screamed, chaos erupting. Charles froze, the echo ringing in his ears. He wasn't hit, but a bullet had ripped through the podium, inches from his chest. Panic spread. People ducked, scrambled, pushed against each other in terror. The chants of justice turned into cries of fear. Charles's security rushed him, but his eyes stayed locked on the rooftop across the street. For a split second he saw it, the glint of a scope, the shadow of a shooter retreating into the darkness. It wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was war. As Charles was rushed into safety, his phone buzzed. A message, unmarked number. Just 4 chilling words. This is only beginning. His breath caught. If Reynolds was just a pawn, then who was pulling the strings? He looked at Agent Monroe, whose face had gone pale, his jaw tight. And that's when Charles realized something far more terrifying. Monroe wasn't surprised. He knew. And if he knew, whose side was he really on? The courthouse steps were still stained with fear from the gunshot that ripped through the night. Panic had scattered the crowd, mothers clutching their children, elders limping to safety, reporters dropping cameras in the chaos. But Charles Williams, the mayor, refused to be broken. He had stared death in the face and survived. And now, standing in the shadows of City Hall, his heart still pounding, he knew one thing. The people behind this weren't trying to scare him anymore. They were trying to end him. And the worst part? The man who claimed to be his ally, Agent Monroe of the Department of Justice, had not flinched when the bullet was fired. He hadn't been shocked. He hadn't been caught off guard. His silence told the truth Charles had been too stubborn to see. Monroe wasn't here to protect him. He was here to control him. "Mr. Mayor," Monroe said, his tone calm as ever, "you need to step down. Tonight proves it's too dangerous. For you, for the city. Walk away while you still can." Charles stared into Monroe's cold, calculating eyes. "Step down? That's what you want, isn't it? This was never about protecting me. This was about silencing me." Monroe didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was written in the stillness of his face. Later that night, Charles sat alone in his office, the weight of the entire town pressing down on his shoulders. Outside, protests lit the streets, some demanding justice, others calling him reckless, dangerous. Fear was spreading like wildfire, and behind that fear was the hand of the machine. His phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Tomorrow. Midnight. Abandoned mill. Come alone. Answers await." It smelled like a trap. But Charles knew he couldn't ignore it. If he was going to bring down this machine, he had to step into its belly. The mill was a skeleton of rust and shadows, its broken windows like jagged teeth against the moonlight. Charles walked inside, every step echoing, his heart steady. He wasn't armed. He came with nothing but resolve. From the darkness, a slow clap echoed. Chief Reynolds stepped out, his smug face bruised by humiliation but still dripping with arrogance. Well. The mayor finally shows his face. Charles's eyes narrowed. "You've lost, Reynolds. The people saw what you did. The system you built is crumbling." Reynolds chuckled darkly. "The system? You think I built this? I'm nothing but a guard dog. The real power is standing right behind you." Charles spun around. Out of the shadows walked Agent Monroe. His suit crisp, his smile sharp. The betrayal complete. "You didn't really think I was here to help you, did you?" Monroe's voice was venom wrapped in velvet. "You're a threat, Charles. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you could do. A black mayor who exposes the truth? Who rallies the people? That's dangerous. Not just to Ridgewood. To the whole order we've worked so hard to maintain." Charles's fists clenched. "So all this time, you and Reynolds were working together?" Monroe shook his head. "No. Reynolds works for me. And men like me answer to powers far above your understanding. You're playing checkers, Mr. Mayor. We're playing chess." Reynolds smirked, stepping closer. "And tonight the game ends." 2 officers emerged from the shadows, rifles raised, aimed at Charles. The trap had closed. But Charles wasn't finished. "You can kill me," he said, his voice echoing through the mill, "but you can't kill the truth. You can't kill the people. And you can't kill the movement. Every camera, every phone, every witness, they've seen too much. My blood won't silence them. It'll ignite them." For the first time, Monroe's smile faltered. Just slightly. Charles pressed harder. "Do you know why you're afraid of me? Because you know the world is changing. Because you know that one day the people you step on will rise so high you won't be able to breathe. And when that day comes, men like you won't be remembered as kings. You'll be remembered as cowards." Reynolds snarled, furious, raising his gun himself. "Enough talk. Let's end this." The trigger clicked. But before the bullet could fly, the mill doors burst open. Floodlights blinded the room. Dozens of townspeople stormed in, phones raised high, live streaming, chanting, shouting. "We're watching. We see you. No more lies. The officers hesitated. The rifles shook. They couldn't fire, not with the whole world watching. Reynolds' rage boiled over. "Turn those cameras off," he screamed. But it was too late. Charles stepped forward, standing tall in the center of the light. "This is what you fear the most, Reynolds? Not me. Not one man. But all of us together." The crowd erupted in cheers. Monroe's calm mask finally cracked, his voice a growl. "You think this ends here? This is bigger than you, Charles. Bigger than Ridgewood. You've just painted a target on your back so large the whole country will see it." Charles looked him dead in the eye. "Good. Let them see. Because the struggle doesn't end with me. It begins with us." The people roared, their voices shaking the very walls of the mill. But as the cheers thundered, as justice seemed to triumph, Charles felt it, a vibration in the ground, the low rumble of engines outside. He looked to the doors and his blood ran cold. Through the broken windows, dozens more black SUVs surrounded the mill. Men in black tactical gear spilled out, heavier armed, faceless behind masks. This wasn't local police. This wasn't Reynolds. This was something far deadlier. Monroe's smile returned, darker than ever. "Did you really think you'd won? No, Mr. Mayor. The game has just begun." The floodlights flickered. The crowd fell silent. And Charles Williams, standing in the center of it all, realized the final showdown wasn't here in Ridgewood. It was bigger. Much bigger. Because this wasn't just his fight anymore. It was a war.